Very
All
good.
right. Starting off with the electric grid. In 2021, a severe winter storm caused blackouts across the state, and it caused the deaths of hundreds of Texans. You have called for investors to build more natural gas plants in Texas. How could this prevent another power grid crisis?
So if you look at the general numbers that we have in Texas on the power grid, I'm using general numbers, we have around 85,000 megawatts of power, but that includes about 25,000 megawatts or so of renewables, mostly wind. You have to have enough natural gas, dispatchable thermal delivery that you can count on all the time outside of your renewables. We do not have enough natural gas. We could use hydroelectric, hydrogen, coal, nuclear. The federal government is pretty much locking down coal and nuclear, but we've got plenty of natural gas cheap under our ground in Texas. And we need to build more natural gas plants. But what has happened is in the last 20 years, all the incentives from the federal government and some from local and state government have gone to renewables. And so it's not an even playing field. People aren't investing in natural gas plants because they have an unfair advantage on the renewable side. So we have to create incentives and level the playing field so that people will invest in natural gas because we need more natural gas. Here's the bottom line. If you have 85,000 watts of power and 25,000 are renewables, that leaves you with 60. On a really bad hot day or a cold winter day, we need anywhere from 68,000 megawatts of power into the 70,000 megawatts of power. And if the wind's not blowing, we don't have enough. So we have to do this, and we'll get it done this session.
So what are your thoughts on the Electric Reliability Council of Texas' current work on redesigning the power grid?
Well, the Business and Commerce Committee in the Senate had a hearing on it. They were not impressed. And they delivered a letter signed by senators saying, hold up on that plan. And I, quite frankly, wasn't impressed with it either. We need to build more plants, and they have that same goal, but the incentive package that they put together seems to be a little bit more long-term. We can't wait long-term. We're adding power needs to our grid every day as people move here and businesses move here. So we'll work with the PUC, we'll work with ERCOT, we will work with the Texas House. We'll craft a plan that begins to add more power plants. Look, if we started tomorrow, it's 3 years probably before you can, put together the plan, design the plan, build the plant, and have it hooked to the grid. So we have to do it this session, and we're going to address this issue, and we'll work with the PUC. But right now, the members of the Senate, at least, weren't totally supportive. Would be the kind thing to say of the plan they put out.
So moving on to education, you have pushed for reform tenure in higher education to combat the teachings of critical race theory.
Yeah.
The Texas Faculty Association spokesperson has claimed that this would ignore the First Amendment rights of faculty members and their students. What are your thoughts on this?
Look, this all started with the University of Texas when their professors out of nowhere last year said, we're going to teach critical race theory. And for people who really aren't sure what that is, that's basically teaching that if you're white, you are the oppressor. And if you're a person of color, you're the victim. And they want to teach that in our schools. And we banned that from K through 12. Parents don't want it for their children in K through 12. White parents don't want it. Black parents don't want it. Brown parents don't want it. It's not about teaching the history of our country and things that we did wrong, like slavery. We teach those things. That's far different from critical race theory that says you're born a racist or you're born a victim. And so the professors out of nowhere at University of Texas said, we're going to teach it in our colleges. And I said, wait a minute. We banned it in K through 12 because we publicly fund those schools. We publicly fund the University of Texas and all the public universities in the state. And we're going to pass legislation that you can't do that. Parents don't want that taught in college either. And their response was, well, look, we're not listening to you. We don't want to be accountable. They literally said this. We don't want the legislature to interfere with what we teach. We don't want the Board of Regents to interfere with what we teach. In essence, we're not accountable to anyone. Well, you are. You're accountable to the Board of Regents. You're accountable to the legislature who funds your programs. And you're accountable to the parents of the students who are spending thousands of dollars a year to come to university. And that was their response. We're not accountable, get out of our business. Well, everyone's accountable to someone. And so I came back and said, if that's your attitude, that you're not going to, that you're going to ignore any wishes of the legislature, any wishes of the parents, any wishes of the Board of Regents, then maybe we need to look at tenure, which is guaranteed employment. How many people out there watching right now have a guaranteed job? Can never, ever be fired. Well, once you're a professor, after so many years, you get tenure, you basically can't be fired. Occasionally they are if they do something really bad. But we do have a right in Texas with the taxpayer money to say to the schools, we don't want this being taught. We have that right. And that has nothing to do with free speech. We have that right to say this is what we expect from the legislature because this is what the people are telling us.
So it was proposed to prioritize increasing teacher pay,
Yes.
giving a 13th check or a cost of living adjustment. Could you tell me more about this?
Sure. So in 2019, I pushed through a $2 billion package for teacher pay, the biggest ever. Teaching should be a profession, not a job. And we need more teachers and we need to attract them and we need to increase pay, which we did. And we're going to put more money into that allotment this session to continue that pay increase for our retired teachers. We've increased the healthcare benefits. We have made their fund actuarially sound up until this year. And with inflation, we may have to make some continued adjustments. And we've given them a 13th check. We've given retired teachers 2 of my 4 years an extra check because we had the money. So we need to do that for our retired teachers, which is a way of attracting new teachers so they know they have a secure retirement one day. Because school teachers, very few get Social Security. And they're living off the averages of around a $1,500 a month pension. So we have to give them a cost of living allowance. It's called a COLA. Or we have to continue to give them a 13th check. And I've told our retired teachers, whichever works best for you, we'll do. So we have to have the best people that we can get in our schools teaching. And one of the other things I did that a lot of folks don't know is that if your son or daughter, if they're going to college, if they will become a math or science teacher, we'll pay for their education. There's some parameters with that. They have to teach so many years, but we'll pay for their education. We do that if you'll go into law enforcement. We'll pay for your college education. And I'm laying out a program for nurses as well, because we already pay for our doctors to be trained. I want to pay the scholarships for nurses. We need more nurses.
I was just about to ask you about that. Thank you.
Yes.
So another thing, the Parents' Bill of Rights proponent promises to give parents more decision-making control over discussions regarding topics such as race, gender, and sex to prevent the indoctrination of students, similar to Florida's Parental Rights and Education Bill. However, the Trevor Project has said that they saw a 150% increase in LGBT youth suicide rates when compared to the same time period in 2020. If passed in Texas, how do you believe LGBTQ students will be affected?
Look, we need to take care of all of our students and be respectful of all of our students and help them where we can, which we've always done in Texas. At the same time, parents don't want their first and second graders taught sex. They don't want them taught about how to become a transgender person. Parents don't want that. They definitely don't want it in elementary school or middle school. Some don't want it in high school. And they don't want boys playing girls sports. We passed a bill to ban that last session so that boys can't dominate girls sports and take away opportunities and scholarships for young girls. It's just not right. And that passed last session. So you protect the rights of everyone, but you don't take the rights away from everyone else in doing that. And there's a fine balance there. But we don't want pornographic books in the library. This wokeism from the left that's infiltrated schools all across the country, Texas parents don't want that to happen. So we will pass a parental bill of rights for parents so that they have a say in their child's education. And the school districts need to respond to the parents. They need to be listening to these parents. They don't want their children in school being taught some of the things that are being taught in the classroom. It's real simple. Parents have a right to have a say in their child's education. It's that simple. Before we run out of time, I want to be sure we talk about the bus tour and the big rural programs that are coming out, if we can. If you could ask me a question about that, yes. Because the 2 major initiatives are on mental health care and funding law enforcement in rural Texas. So if you'd give me a question on that, would be great.
I was just about to get into that.
Okay.
So moving into law enforcement, yes. It has been called for a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence for people who use firearms in a crime. Real quick, how would this apply to juvenile cases?
So bottom line is some juveniles are then evaluated and tried as adults, depending on the crime and depending on the age. The bill that I proposed is a 10-year mandatory sentence for anyone who uses a gun in a crime. We shouldn't be taking guns away from law-abiding citizens, which most people who own guns are. We should be taking the guns out of the hands of criminals. And I'm already getting support from lots of people across the state, Republicans, Democrats, district attorneys, police association, because it's the Wild West out there. But let me address a much bigger problem. As I traveled across Texas on my bus tour, I saw this need to help our counties and their law enforcement, because the history of Texas has been, we don't give money to counties to hire sheriffs and deputies and take care of their jails. That's their responsibility. But they're being overwhelmed. The 2 million people are crossing the border every year. Many of them are coming in through counties all over Texas, breaking into cars, breaking into homes, breaking into businesses that law enforcement has to deal with. We have many people that are arrested that are in jail with mental health issues, and there's nowhere to send them. And the counties are on the hook for that money. And while it's unprecedented and expensive, I laid forth a program that for about 230 counties or so, the rural counties, however you define those, we are going to, my goal is, and I think we'll get support, help fund their sheriffs and police departments so that they can have that burden lifted from their shoulders. Not totally, they've got to continue to do that, but that we can help them. I met sheriffs along the road who are making in the $30,000 a year range, or deputies making it in the high 20s. You know, how are you going to attract people to be in law enforcement in rural Texas if that's the salary level and they don't have enough equipment? So we're going to push a robust program. I don't know what the final number will be, and it may depend on the size of the county, the size of their budget, but it's going to be a significant program to help them fund their sheriff's department, hire more deputies, because people who live in rural Texas deserve the same law enforcement protection that we do in some of our bigger counties that have more funding. The second thing tied into that are our mental care hospitals. We don't have enough mental care hospitals right now, particularly in West Texas. So I'm proposing building new ones or adding beds to the current ones, or buying beds at, I say buying beds, like we go to a regular hospital and say, we'd like to pay for X number of beds for mental health care facilities. So we need more help. And right now my plan is one more for West Texas, the Panhandle area, increase the bedding in Wichita Falls, and spend money in West Central Texas to buy more beds in private hospitals, build new hospitals in East Texas and the Valley. We must have more mental health care hospitals in rural Texas, and we're going to get that done.
One more question about the Rural Law Enforcement Fund.
Yes.
Will any of that money be going towards preparing and training officers for incidents such as what happened in Uvalde?
So that's a great question. And right now, I see that fund as whether it's $500,000 a year, $600,000 a year. I don't know what that number will be. That's up to the legislators to decide on that number, but enough to raise the level of sheriffs. The Sheriff's Association would like every sheriff to be at least at $75,000. Again, I've met some that are in the 30s or 40s, and to hire more deputies and get more equipment. When it comes to preparing and training them for what happened in Uvalde or Santa Fe School several years prior to that, the state has other programs for that. And we are looking at building those out even more. We put $100 million into school security after the Santa Fe shooting several years ago. And some of that money still wasn't even tapped when the Uvalde shooting happened. So we need to be sure the school districts are aware of what's available to them. Law enforcement is available to that law enforcement is aware of what's available to them. But that will be a separate and a robust program also. One of the things I did right after the Uvalde shooting, what did we hear? Well, we heard they waited for ballistic shields. So already in the budget, already being spent, I put in, during this interim period, $50 million that the governor and the speaker supported, and I supported some of their initiatives as well in this program, so that every school district has ballistic shields, so that no one ever has to wait to go in. We don't want that excuse, and I want those ballistic shields to be eventually to every department. So if a city policeman or a sheriff's deputy or state trooper shows up on the scene, they've got a ballistic shield in the trunk available to them. So we've already put $50 million into that, and we'll put more into that program.
All right. One last question.
Yes. Can
you tell me what your priorities are with property tax relief?
Yeah, so all of these issues I've talked about are important. And fortunately, we have a big surplus this year that we can address them in a responsible way and in a way we haven't had the money to do before. And your programs are like if we're going to help law enforcement in rural Texas, that's an ongoing program. Other programs like building infrastructure is a one-time program. So you have to spend that money wisely because you don't want to create a program that you have to end, in a few years because you don't have the money. So we'll be very smart about that. Property taxes are a key because people don't want to feel like they're renting their house from their local government. And so when I came into office, I increased the homestead exemption that had been on the books for decades at $15,000 a year to $25,000. Last year, I increased it to $40,000. And this year, I want to take it to $60,000 or $65,000. And before I leave office, I hope it's at $100,000. That's right off the top that comes off the value of your homes. And we will continue to increase property tax reductions and savings, and the other programs are a little bit more complex as we go through school formula funding to our school districts. But if people watching will look at their tax bill and look at what their appraisal bill was, a lot of people had sky-high appraisals in the spring, they'll see that their appraisals went up here, and in the old days, their tax bill went right with it. If your appraisal went up 8%, your tax bill went up 8%. Well, now a lot of people saw their appraisals go up, but they looked at their tax bill they got in October, and they saw their school taxes were about the same. Some went up a little bit, some went down a little bit, because we're trying to level out that growth instead of being 7%, 8%, 9% as they used to be in the past, to be closer to population and inflation in most years, 3 or 4%. And so that's a continuing effort that we're going to make. But increasing the homestead exemption is a clear, direct way to take value off the home that they're not taxed on, and we'll do that for sure.
Before we close, was there anything we did not cover that you would like to discuss?
I think you did a great job of great questions. What I would share with you is that 100 city 17-day bus tour through rural Texas was a great experience for me that I'll remember my whole life. I met great people, had great food, everywhere I went, including your neck of the woods. Everywhere I went, it was a tremendous experience, and I learned a lot from listening to people. And that's why the initiatives for law enforcement, mental health care facilities, focusing on the grid, obviously, focusing on property taxes. You come back to the Capitol and you say, after you've talked to all these people and seen them face to face and listened over breakfast, lunch, or dinner, that we've got to get this done. And you've got great senators out in, Charles Perry, Kevin Sparks, great senators out in Central and West Texas, but and they do a great job representing rural Texas. But there's nothing like sitting down, having breakfast with somebody, with the sheriff or the county judge, and one-to-one, eye to eye, and you hear their heart and you hear what they need. And so it's had a great impact on me.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a Merry Christmas and a blessed New Year.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.